falls differently in the Middle Ages. There are no glowing screens, no streetlights humming in the distance, no traffic, no electric buzz that fills modern darkness. When the sun sinks below the horizon, the world changes completely. It becomes deeper, wider, almost frightening. Imagine standing in a small village somewhere in medieval England. The year is 1250. The sky is turning purple. Smoke curls from low wooden houses with thatched roofs. The air smells of damp earth, animals, and firewood. Chickens are quiet. Dogs settle down. The last sounds of tools striking wood fade away. And then darkness. Real darkness. Inside a peasant's home, there is only one room. A single open fire burns in the center. The smoke escapes slowly through a hole in the roof. The walls are made of wood and mud. The floor is packed dirt, sometimes covered with straw. The entire family lives here, eats here, sleeps here. Sleep in the medieval world was not private. It was not silent, and it was rarely comfortable. The father of the house removes his rough wool tunic. The mother checks the fire one last time. Children curl together like puppies near the warmest corner. There are no beds as we imagine them today. Most peasants sleep on straw pallets, sacks stuffed with hay or dried grass. Over time, these sacks collect insects. Fleas are common. Bedbugs are normal. It is simply part of life. They lie down fully clothed, often wearing the same garments they worked in all day. Night clothes exist for the wealthy, but most people cannot afford separate clothing just for sleeping. A blanket might be shared. Sometimes there is only one. The room is dark except for the fading firelight. Outside, the night is alive. Owls call from the trees. Wind presses against wooden shutters. Somewhere far away, a wolf howls. In many parts of Europe, wolves are not just stories. They are real, and they come close to villages when food is scarce. For medieval people, night carries fear. There are no police patrols, no street lamps. If someone knocks at your door after sunset, your heart pounds. Bandits travel in darkness. Thieves move quietly between houses. Superstition grows stronger when the light disappears. People believe in spirits, demons, and wandering souls. The darkness feels crowded, but eventually, exhaustion wins. A peasant works from sunrise to sunset, plowing fields, harvesting grain, carrying water, chopping wood. The body aches deeply. Muscles burn. There is no choice but to sleep. And so they drift off. But here is something strange. Medieval sleep was not one long, unbroken stretch like ours today. Most people slept in two parts. The first sleep began shortly after sunset. They would sleep for 3 or 4 hours. Deep, heavy sleep, the body sinking into straw, the fire turning into glowing embers. Then they would wake up, not from noise, not from fear, just naturally. This was called the first sleep. In the middle of the night, many medieval people simply opened their eyes. Calmly, peacefully, the house still dark, the air cold. Sometimes they added wood to the fire. Sometimes they whispered prayers. Some used this quiet hour for thinking, for talking softly with a spouse, for reflection, for intimacy. Old medical texts even suggested that this middle waking period was the best time for conception. Others would step outside. Imagine that, standing under a sky filled with stars so bright it almost hurts to look at them. No light pollution. The Milky Way stretching like a river of silver. The village silent. Frost forming on the ground. For some, this middle hour was peaceful. For others, it was unsettling. Because the night still belonged to the unknown. In cities, things were slightly different. Travel now to medieval Paris, or Florence, or London. The streets are narrow and filthy. Waste runs through open gutters. At night, wooden shutters close tightly. A few lanterns flicker in wealthier districts, but most areas are completely black. City gates close after dark. Anyone outside without reason may be questioned. Inside a merchant's home, sleep is more comfortable than in a peasant hut, but not by much. Beds are wooden frames with ropes stretched across. On top rests a mattress stuffed with feathers, if the family is wealthy enough. Curtains hang around the bed to keep out drafts and provide privacy. Privacy is precious. Servants may sleep in the same room. Children share beds. Guests might join too. Sharing beds is normal in medieval times. It is practical. Body heat keeps everyone warm. Yes, warm. Because medieval nights are cold, especially in winter. There is no central heating, only fireplaces. And firewood costs money. So many families let the fire die down overnight. They pile under blankets made of wool or fur. They wear caps to keep heat from escaping their heads. And still, sometimes, they shiver. Sleep is lighter in winter. Teeth chatter. Wind sneaks through cracks in walls. Snow presses against shutters. And always, always, there is sound. Wood creaking. Animals shifting. The slow breathing of others nearby. Sleep is communal, shared. Human, now imagine a medieval castle. Thick stone walls, large halls, tapestries hanging for warmth. Even here, sleep is not as peaceful as fairy tales suggest. A lord sleeps on a grand bed, raised high. The mattress is softer. Sheets may be linen, but the stone walls trap cold air. Fires burn in large hearths, yet the chambers remain chilly. Guards walk the halls at night. Torches flicker. Footsteps echo. Outside, wind whistles along battlements. Even nobility do not sleep deeply. Danger is always possible. Rival families, political enemies, assassins. The Middle Ages are not calm times, and so sleep is cautious. Rest comes in layers, light, deep light again. People dream vividly. Medieval people care deeply about dreams. They believe dreams carry messages from God, or warnings, or signs of illness. Dream books exist to interpret symbols. A dream about water might mean change. A dream about falling could mean fear of sin. When someone wakes from a nightmare, they do not dismiss it. They remember it, because night is powerful. The rhythm of medieval sleep follows the sun. There are no alarms, no strict bedtime routines. The seasons change sleep patterns. In summer, days are long, so bedtime comes later. In winter, darkness arrives early, stretching the hours of rest, but always divided. First sleep, waking hour. Second sleep. This pattern lasts for centuries, and yet something will change. Slowly, quietly, over time, the way humans sleep will transform forever. Artificial light, industry, urban life, all of it will reshape the night. But for now, in this medieval world, people turn in their straw beds. The fire fades. The sky turns deeper black. A dog barks in the distance. And somewhere, a man opens his eyes in the middle of the night, listening to the silence. Because what happened during those waking hours reveals even more about medieval life. And that is where our story continues. The fire has almost died. Only a soft red glow remains in the center of the room. The air is colder now. Breath turns faintly white in the darkness. Somewhere beside you, someone shifts under a rough wool blanket. A child murmurs in their sleep, and your eyes are open. This is not insomnia. This is not a problem. In the medieval world, waking in the middle of the night is normal, expected, almost designed by nature. This quiet stretch between first sleep and second sleep is sometimes called the watch. It can last an hour, sometimes two. The body feels rested, but not fully awake. The mind feels clear. Thoughts move slowly. For a peasant family, this is a small pocket of time that belongs only to them. The father might rise carefully, stepping over sleeping bodies. He adds a piece of wood to the fire. Sparks crackle softly. The light dances against the mud walls. For a moment, the house feels alive again. The mother might whisper a short prayer. Medieval life is deeply religious. Almost every thought passes through faith. Night feels closer to God or closer to danger. It depends on the heart of the person lying there. In many homes, this waking hour becomes a time for quiet conversation. Husband and wife speak softly. They talk about crops, about debts, about the coming winter, or about nothing important at all. Just words in the dark. Intimate, honest. Medical writers in the Middle Ages even suggest that this is the best time for intimacy. The body is relaxed from first sleep. The mind is calm. Many children in medieval Europe may have been conceived during this silent window between darkness and dawn. But not everyone spends this time in warmth and closeness. Some lie awake and worry because medieval life is fragile. Harvests can fail. Illness spreads quickly. A single infection can kill. There are no antibiotics, no modern hospitals. A cough that lingers too long becomes terrifying, and night makes fears louder. In villages, some people step outside during the watch. Picture the door opening slowly. Cold air rushes in. The sky is enormous. Stars burn brightly. The moon casts pale light over fields. Everything looks different at night. Familiar paths feel strange. Trees become shadows shaped like figures. Superstition fills these hours. Many medieval people believe that spirits move freely after midnight, that demons roam, that witches gather. These beliefs are not just fairy tales, they are woven into daily life. If livestock falls sick, it might be blamed on a curse. If a child has nightmares, perhaps a spirit touched them. The night feels thin, like a curtain between worlds. In towns and cities, the watch feels different. Take London in the 1300s. The streets are tight and crooked. Waste from homes runs through gutters. During the day, the city is loud with merchants, carts, and shouting. But at night, it changes. Curfews exist in many medieval cities. A bell rings to signal that fires should be covered and doors closed. This is partly for safety. Wooden buildings burn easily. One careless flame can destroy entire streets. After the curfew bell, movement outside becomes suspicious. Watchmen patrol the streets. They carry lanterns and simple weapons. Their job is to guard against thieves and fires, but they are not powerful forces. Crime still happens. During the watch, some people in cities remain awake on purpose. Bakers begin preparing dough. Bread must be ready at sunrise. Their ovens glow while the rest of the city sleeps. Monks in monasteries also wake during the night. This is important. In monasteries across Europe, sleep follows a strict schedule. Monks go to bed early, often shortly after sunset. But in the middle of the night, bells ring inside stone walls. It is time for prayer. They rise from narrow wooden beds. The air inside the monastery is cold and silent. Candles flicker along corridors. The monks gather in the chapel for a service called matins. Their voices chant in Latin, slow, echoing, almost hypnotic. For them, the night is sacred. Waking in darkness is not a disruption. It is devotion. After prayers, they may return to their beds for second sleep. This rhythm, sleep, wake, sleep, feels natural in a world without artificial light. But even in peaceful monasteries, the night is not always calm. Illness spreads quickly in shared sleeping spaces. Monks sleep in large dormitories. If one coughs, others hear it. If one is feverish, it is known. Disease travels silently in the dark. And beyond monastery walls, danger still exists. Bandits move under cover of night. Travelers fear sleeping outdoors. Inns offer shelter, but even there, privacy is rare. Strangers share beds. Trust is fragile. In many inns, dozens of people lie side by side in one large room. Merchants, pilgrims, laborers, all breathing the same air, snoring, whispering, dreaming, and sometimes stealing. It is not uncommon to wake and find your purse missing. Sleep is never fully secure. Now imagine a castle again during the watch. A guard walks along stone walls. His boots echo. He peers into darkness beyond the moat. Torches crackle in iron holders. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Inside, a noblewoman might wake and ring for a servant. Candles are lit. Perhaps she reads from a religious text. Or perhaps she simply stares at the canopy above her bed, listening to the wind. Even the wealthy feel the weight of night. The human body in the medieval world follows the sun closely. When darkness lasts longer in winter, sleep stretches longer too. When summer days are bright and endless, rest shortens. There is no concept of staying up past midnight for entertainment. No glowing windows filled with activity. Once the fire burns low, the world truly rests. But here is something surprising. Historical records show that many legal documents mention events happening after first sleep or before second sleep. It was such a common pattern that it shaped how people measured time. Time itself felt different then. Without clocks in every home, hours were not counted the way we count them now. Night was divided by feeling, by bells from churches, by phases of sleep, and as the waking hour slowly fades, tiredness returns. Eyes grow heavy again. The fire dims to ash. Bodies shift once more under shared blankets. The second sleep begins. But what dreams fill that sleep? What fears creep into it? And how did plague, war, and famine shape the way medieval people rested their heads at night? Because sleep in the Middle Ages was not just about rest. It was about survival. And in the centuries ahead, something dark will sweep across Europe, changing nights forever. That is where we turn next. There is something about sickness that changes the way a person sleeps. And in the Middle Ages, sickness was never far away. Imagine lying in a small wooden house in the year 1348. The air feels heavy. The summer heat presses against the walls. Outside, the village is quieter than usual. Too quiet, because the plague has arrived. The Black Death moves silently through towns and countryside. It begins with fever, then swelling, then pain that feels like fire under the skin. Within days, many are dead. Sleep becomes impossible. Families lie awake listening for coughs, for groans, for the sound of someone struggling to breathe. In a one-room house, there is no escaping illness. If one person falls sick, everyone is exposed. At night, fear spreads faster than disease. Parents stay awake longer during the watch, checking their children's foreheads. A husband listens to his wife's breathing, wondering if it sounds weaker than before. The darkness feels closer, thicker. In plague years, the night carries a different weight. The usual sounds of owls and wind are replaced by something else. Church bells ring more often, not for prayer, but for death. Carts roll through streets before dawn, collecting bodies. Sometimes the wheels creak loudly in the stillness. Sleep is broken not just into two parts now, but into fragments. Short stretches, sudden waking, sweat-soaked nightmares. Many medieval people believe the plague is a punishment from God, or bad air, or the alignment of planets. They do not understand bacteria. They do not know about rats carrying infected fleas. So they pray, and they fear. Monasteries are not spared. In fact, they suffer greatly. Monks who gather for midnight prayer now stand in half-empty chapels. Beds in dormitories remain unused. Silence grows heavier with each passing week. In cities like Florence and London, entire neighborhoods fall silent. Fires burn lower at night because there are fewer hands to tend them. Sleep during plague years becomes restless and haunted. Dreams turn dark. People dream of angels with swords, of shadows entering their homes, of endless fields filled with graves. Medieval dream books try to explain these visions, but no explanation feels comforting anymore. And yet, life continues. Even during plague, crops must be harvested. Animals must be fed. So exhaustion still pulls bodies into sleep eventually. But something shifts in the rhythm. The watch, that peaceful middle hour, grows shorter for some, longer for others. Anxiety stretches time. A single hour can feel endless when death lingers nearby. Now move forward a few decades. The plague has passed, but the memory remains. Villages are smaller. Many homes stand empty. Labor becomes more valuable because there are fewer workers. Slowly, society begins to change. And so does sleep. With fewer people in a household, sometimes there is more space in bed, more privacy. A subtle shift begins in how people experience the night. But danger has not disappeared. War shapes medieval sleep just as deeply as disease. Picture a soldier camped outside a castle during a siege. The year is 1415. The ground beneath him is cold and damp. He sleeps in armor or close to it. His sword rests within reach. Sleep here is thin as paper. At any moment, an alarm could sound. An arrow could fly. The enemy could attack under cover of darkness. Soldiers learn to sleep lightly, to wake instantly at the smallest noise. Their first sleep might last only an hour before they are shaken awake for guard duty. Inside besieged castles, families lie awake listening to distant drums or shouted commands. Food supplies grow thin. Hunger sharpens the mind at night. Stomachs growl loudly in the silence. Children cry from cold or fear. Sleep becomes something stolen in pieces. Even outside of plague and war, medieval nights are rarely fully peaceful. Homes are filled with animals. Chickens may roost indoors. A pig might sleep near the door. Their movements create noise. Their smells fill the air. Parasites thrive in shared spaces. Fleas bite throughout the night. Bedbugs hide in straw mattresses. People wake scratching. Itching becomes part of sleeping. And yet, medieval people do not see this as unbearable. It is normal. Comfort, as we define it today, does not exist in the same way. Instead, there is acceptance. A simple wool blanket is a treasure. A feather mattress is luxury beyond imagination for most. A private bedchamber with curtains feels almost royal. But let us return to something deeper. The mind at night. Without electric light, darkness feels alive. Medieval people grow up truly knowing the night sky. They recognize constellations. They mark time by stars. Some believe comets signal disaster. Others see beauty in the endless black above them. Sleep is connected to nature's rhythm. In winter, nights stretch long and heavy. People may sleep 10 or even 12 total hours, divided into 2 phases. In summer, shorter nights mean less total sleep. There is no fixed 8-hour rule. The body adapts. But something curious is happening beneath the surface of history. Slowly, candles become more common. Oil lamps improve. Wealthy households begin extending evening activities slightly longer. Reading by candlelight becomes fashionable among scholars. Artificial light is still weak and expensive, but it is growing. And with it, the boundaries of night begin to blur. The watch period starts to change. Some people stay awake longer before first sleep. Some skip the waking hour entirely on certain nights. The old rhythm, the ancient pattern humans have followed for centuries, begins to soften. But that transformation will take time. For now, in this medieval world of flickering firelight and whispered prayers, people still turn toward second sleep after the quiet watch. Their bodies curl under wool and fur. Their minds drift once more. Outside, stars fade slowly as the horizon begins to pale. Because soon, roosters will crow. And morning in the Middle Ages arrives quickly and without mercy. The way people wake, and how their days begin after these long, divided nights, reveals even more about what medieval sleep truly meant. And that is where we go next. Morning does not arrive gently in the Middle Ages. There is no soft alarm tone, no glowing clock beside the bed, no slow scroll through messages before rising. There is only sound. A rooster cries out into the gray dawn. Somewhere in the village, a church bell begins to ring. Its heavy metal voice carries across fields and rooftops. It does not ask. It commands. Wake up. In a peasant home, Bodies stir almost instantly. The second sleep has ended. The air is cold. The fire is mostly ash. Someone coughs. A child rubs their eyes. The day begins whether they are ready or not. Sleep in the medieval world is never about comfort alone. It is preparation for labor. The father rises first. His joints ache from yesterday's work. Straw sticks to his clothing. He stretches slowly, feeling stiffness in his back. The ground has not been kind, but there is no time to complain. The mother follows. She pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders and kneels to breathe life back into the fire. Sparks jump. A thin flame appears. Soon, a small pot will hang above it. Children rise next, still heavy with dreams. They have slept close together for warmth. Privacy does not exist here. Every movement is shared. And yet, there is something steady about this rhythm. First sleep, watch. Second sleep, dawn. It has been this way for generations. In villages across Europe, from York to Cologne, mornings follow the same pattern. The bell from the church marks time more clearly than any clock. Prayer, then work. For many, sleep is deeply tied to faith. Before eating, before stepping outside, families often whisper morning prayers. They thank God for surviving the night, because survival is never guaranteed. Infant mortality is high. Illness strikes without warning. A peaceful night is a blessing. Now imagine a medieval city waking up. In Paris, narrow streets fill quickly with noise. Merchants lift wooden shutters. Bakers carry fresh bread to their stalls. Blacksmiths begin hammering metal before the sun fully rises. The smell of smoke and manure mixes in the air. City dwellers may have slept slightly differently than peasants, but their mornings are just as demanding. Apprentices rise early to serve masters. Servants hurry to prepare water and clothing for wealthy households. In grand homes, a servant might enter quietly to wake a nobleman. Curtains around the bed are pulled back. Pale morning light filters through narrow windows. The Lord stretches under heavy blankets filled with feathers. He has slept warmer than most. But even noble sleep is not free from interruption. Drafts slip through stone walls. Tapestries hang not just for decoration, but for insulation. Without them, chambers would feel like caves, and noise travels easily in stone corridors. Footsteps echo, doors creak. The castle never truly rests. Still, the wealthy have advantages. Their mattresses are softer, their linens cleaner. They may own multiple blankets. They may even own nightshirts made specifically for sleeping. A small but meaningful comfort. But even here, sleep is rarely solitary. Children share beds with nurses. Ladies in waiting may sleep nearby. Trusted servants remain close at night for security. Privacy, as we understand it today, is almost unknown in the medieval world. Now consider something else. What about dreams? When medieval people wake in the morning, dreams are not quickly forgotten. They are discussed, interpreted, sometimes feared. If a farmer dreams of drowning, he may wonder if it means financial trouble. If a woman dreams of fire, she may fear conflict ahead. Dream interpretation is taken seriously. Clergy write about it. Scholars debate it. Common people share stories of dreams that later seem to come true. In a world filled with uncertainty, dreams offer meaning. And yet, despite this deep connection to sleep, something is beginning to shift quietly across Europe. Clocks. In the 14th century, mechanical clocks begin appearing in church towers. They are large and not perfectly accurate, but they mark hours in a new way. Time slowly becomes something measured, not just felt. This changes how people think about night. Instead of simply first sleep and second sleep, there are now numbered hours. Midnight becomes more clearly defined. As cities grow and trade expands, structured schedules become more important. Markets open at certain times. Work begins at specific hours. The flexible rhythm of medieval sleep begins to tighten. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly. Artificial light also improves. Candles become slightly more affordable. Oil lamps burn longer. Wealthy households stay awake later into the evening for reading, conversation, or planning. The first sleep begins a little later than before. The watch grows shorter for some. And in busy towns, some people begin pushing through the night entirely. Night watchmen patrol until dawn. Bakers work through darkness. Some craftsmen accept late-night tasks. The line between day and night starts to blur at the edges. But for most people, the body still follows the sun. Exhaustion from physical labor keeps sleep deep and heavy. There is no scrolling in bed, no endless entertainment. Darkness means rest. Yet even in this simple rhythm, not all sleep is equal. Women, especially mothers, sleep lightly. Babies wake often. Illness spreads easily in crowded homes. A single cough can wake everyone. Elderly people often wake earlier than others, sitting quietly by the fire before dawn. Their sleep becomes shorter with age, but their presence anchors the household. And then there are those who cannot sleep, not because of noise, not because of fleas, but because of worry, debt, famine, fear of war, the memory of plague. The medieval world is uncertain, and uncertainty whispers loudest at night. Still, the sun rises every morning. Mist lifts from fields. Frost melts slowly. The sky turns from gray to gold, and medieval people step outside, ready to work again. They carry with them the memory of dreams, the comfort of shared blankets, the cold of stone floors, the quiet watch in the middle of the night. Sleep has shaped them, strengthened them, frightened them, but we have only seen peasants, merchants, nobles, and monks. There is another group whose nights are very different. Travelers, pilgrims. and those who have no home at all. Because sleeping under the open sky in the Middle Ages is something entirely different. And that is where our journey moves next. Not everyone in the Middle Ages sleeps behind wooden doors. Not everyone has walls. For some, the night sky is their ceiling. Imagine a lone traveler walking along a dirt road in the year 1300. The sun has already slipped below the hills. The path ahead is dark and uneven. He carries a small sack over his shoulder. Inside it, bread, maybe dried meat, maybe nothing at all. He must decide quickly. Keep walking in darkness or stop and sleep. Roads in medieval Europe are not safe after sunset. There are no street lamps, no police patrols. Forests stretch wide and deep. Bandits know these roads well. So do wild animals. The traveler steps off the path. He finds a small clearing near a tree. He does not build a large fire that would attract attention. Instead, he wraps his cloak tightly around his body and lies down on the cold earth. This is sleep without shelter. The ground is hard. Stones press into his ribs. Insects crawl across his skin. Every sound feels amplified. A branch snapping in the distance makes his heart race. Is it a deer? Or something worse? Sleep here is shallow. One eye almost open. One hand resting on a knife. For pilgrims walking long distances to holy places like Canterbury Cathedral or Santiago de Compostela Cathedral, nights are uncertain. Some nights they find space in inns. Other nights they sleep in barns, under wagons, or in open fields. Pilgrims often travel in groups for safety. They share stories around small fires before lying down. Their cloaks serve as blankets. Their bags become pillows. And like everyone else in the medieval world, they follow the rhythm of first sleep and second sleep. But the watch, the quiet middle hour, feels very different outdoors. Imagine waking in the middle of the night beneath an open sky. The stars stretch endlessly above. The moon lights the landscape in silver. There are no walls to protect you, no door to close, just you and the dark. Some pilgrims use this time to pray. They whisper to God, asking for protection. Others sit quietly, staring into the fire's last embers, listening for movement beyond the light. And sometimes they do not wake peacefully. Rain can arrive suddenly, soaking clothes and blankets. Wind can cut through thin cloaks like knives. Snow in winter makes sleep almost impossible. Travel in winter is especially brutal. Picture a merchant crossing a mountain pass near Alps. The air is sharp and thin. He sleeps inside a small shelter made of wood and stone. The fire struggles against freezing winds. At night, he curls tightly to preserve warmth. His breath forms clouds inside the shelter. His boots remain on, in case he must move quickly. Sleep here is survival. Even in inns, rest is uncertain. Medieval inns are crowded, loud, of strangers. A single large room might hold 20 or 30 people. Beds are shared without question. It is common for 2, 3, even 4 travelers to sleep in the same bed. Body heat keeps them warm, but trust is fragile. You might wake during the watch to find someone's hand moving too close to your belongings. You might hear whispers between strangers. You might smell sweat, ale, and damp wool thick in the air. Snoring fills the room like thunder, and still, exhaustion wins. Travelers sleep because they must. Now think about those who have no choice but to live outside permanently. The poor, the displaced, those who have lost everything to plague, fire, or war. In growing cities like Venice or London, poverty is visible. Not everyone can afford shelter. Some sleep in doorways, under market stalls, beside church walls. Churches sometimes offer limited protection. Stone buildings hold warmth longer than open air. Beggars gather near cathedral steps, wrapping themselves in whatever fabric they can find. Sleep here is light and broken. City nights are not silent. Drunken voices echo through streets. Horses pass. Watchmen shout hourly calls to mark time and prove they are awake. The hour is past midnight, and all is well. But all is not always well. Fights break out. Theft happens quickly in darkness. A sleeping person is vulnerable. For women alone, night can be especially dangerous. Many try to find groups for protection. Strength comes from numbers. Still, there are moments of quiet beauty. On clear nights, even city dwellers can look up and see stars beyond rooftops. The moon reflects off river water. Bells from distant churches blend into a soft rhythm. Medieval people are deeply connected to the natural world. Without artificial light flooding their senses, they experience the sky in a way modern people rarely do. The phases of the moon matter. A full moon brings brightness and sometimes unease. There are old beliefs that madness increases under its glow. The word lunatic comes from this connection to the moon. A new moon brings deeper darkness, thicker shadows, more fear. Sleep follows these cycles. During bright nights, some people stay awake longer. During dark nights, they retreat quickly indoors. And then there are soldiers on campaign, sleeping in camps far from home. Picture hundreds of men lying beneath rough tents on a battlefield near Agincourt. Armor stacked nearby. Horses tied close. The ground is muddy. The air smells of sweat and iron. Torches burn low. No one sleeps deeply before battle. The first sleep is short. The watch is filled with tension. Some sharpen swords. Some whisper prayers. Some stare into darkness, imagining the next day's bloodshed. The second sleep, if it comes at all, is thin and restless. Dreams are full of noise, shouting, steel clashing, faces of loved ones far away. In the medieval world, where you sleep shapes how you sleep, a peasant in a hut, a monk in a stone cell, a merchant in a crowded inn, a beggar beneath a cathedral arch, a soldier on damp earth. Each experiences the night differently, but all share one thing. Darkness is powerful. It slows the world. It magnifies fear. It deepens faith. It sharpens sound. And yet, despite all discomfort, medieval people accept their nights as natural. They do not chase perfect mattresses or silent rooms. They chase safety. They chase warmth. They chase survival until dawn. But what about children? How do the youngest members of this harsh world experience sleep? What stories fill their minds before closing their eyes? What fears wake them during the watch? Because childhood in the Middle Ages is not as gentle as we might imagine. And that is where we go next. Children in the Middle Ages do not have their own bedrooms. They do not have nightlights glowing softly beside small wooden beds. They do not have shelves filled with toys waiting in the dark. They sleep where space allows. In a peasant home, that often means on straw near their parents. Sometimes 3 or 4 children lie side by side under one rough blanket, their small bodies pressed together for warmth. In winter, this closeness is survival. The room is dark except for the fading fire. For a child, the night feels enormous. Shadows on the wall look like moving creatures. The crackling of wood in the hearth becomes whispers. Wind pushing against the roof sounds like footsteps. Medieval childhood is not protected from fear. Stories of spirits, demons, and wandering souls are common. Parents warn children about the dangers of straying too far at night. The forest is not just trees. It is mystery. It is threat. When a child wakes during the watch, they may not understand why. They open their eyes and see darkness. They hear breathing around them. Maybe a sibling snoring softly. Maybe their mother shifting near the fire. But beyond that small circle of warmth, the world feels endless. Some children cry quietly when they wake. Not loudly, noise at night can bring irritation in crowded homes. A mother might reach out without fully rising, placing a hand on the child's head until they settle again. Comfort is simple. A touch, a whispered prayer. In wealthier homes, children sometimes sleep in separate spaces, but rarely alone. A nurse or servant often lies nearby. Infants sleep in wooden cradles placed close to the parent's bed. Infant mortality is painfully high in the Middle Ages. Many parents lose children before they reach adulthood. Because of this, nights carry deep anxiety for mothers. A baby's cough in the dark can bring sudden panic. A fever discovered during the watch can turn into hours of whispered prayers. Medical knowledge is limited. Herbal remedies exist. Midwives and healers do what they can. But illness remains unpredictable. So mothers sleep lightly. Even during first sleep, they remain aware. A shift in breathing wakes them instantly. Children's dreams are shaped by the world around them. They dream of fields and animals, of saints and angels, of monsters described in village stories. Medieval storytelling is vivid and often frightening. Tales of wolves, witches, and spirits are not just entertainment. They are warnings. If a child wakes from a nightmare, the dream is taken seriously. Parents may make the sign of the cross over them. They may whisper protective prayers. Some hang small religious charms near beds for safety. In monasteries that care for orphaned children, nights follow strict routines. The bells that wake monks for midnight prayer also echo through dormitories where young boys sleep in rows of simple beds. They learn discipline early. When the bell rings, they rise quietly. No complaining. Sleep becomes part of religious life. Ordered, controlled. But outside monastery walls, childhood remains unpredictable. In towns like Florence and Paris, children often work from a young age. Apprenticeships begin early. By the age of 7 or 8, many boys are already training in trades. Girls help with household tasks. Exhaustion shapes their nights. After long days carrying water, cleaning, or learning crafts, children fall asleep quickly. Their bodies are small but strong from labor, and yet they still wake during the watch. Sometimes they listen to adult conversations. They hear worries about money, about taxes, about rumors of war. These words sink into young minds. Other times, they stare quietly at the ceiling beams, imagining shapes in the dark. The medieval world does not separate children from adult realities. They witness death more often. They attend funerals of neighbors. They may see illness up close. The concept of mortality is familiar, not distant. So when they lie in darkness, thoughts can feel heavy even at a young age. Winter nights are especially long for children. Imagine a cold evening in York during January. Snow presses against shutters. Wind howls through cracks. The fire burns low because wood must be saved. Children huddle tightly together. The watch feels longer in winter. Darkness stretches endlessly. A child waking in the middle of the night might feel as if morning will never come. But summer nights are different. In June, daylight lingers. Children stay awake slightly longer. Fireflies glow outside. Warm air drifts through open windows. Sleeping feels softer, easier. The rhythm of nature shapes their rest completely. And then there are children who do not sleep at home at all. Apprentice boys sometimes sleep in workshops. They lie on simple pallets near tools and workbenches. The smell of leather, metal, or wood surrounds them even in dreams. Young servants sleep near kitchens or storage rooms. They wake before dawn to prepare water or light fires. Their sleep is shorter, more controlled by masters' schedules. And what about noble children? In castles, young heirs sleep in better beds, but they are not alone. Nurses, tutors, and servants surround them. Their lives are watched closely. Even at night, protection is constant. Yet castles are cold. Stone walls hold chill air. Heavy blankets are necessary. Tapestries hang not just for beauty, but to block drafts. A noble child might wake during the watch and hear distant footsteps of guards walking the halls. The echo of boots against stone becomes a familiar nighttime sound. Security surrounds them, but so does isolation. Because medieval childhood is not built around privacy or comfort. It is built around family, around duty, around survival. Children grow up understanding that sleep is part of life's rhythm, not a luxury to perfect. They accept fleas. They accept shared blankets. They accept darkness. And as they grow older, their sleep patterns merge fully with adult life. First sleep, the quiet watch. Second sleep, but something else begins to influence even the youngest minds. Education is expanding slowly. Universities are forming in cities like Oxford and Bologna. Scholars stay awake later, reading by candlelight. New ideas about time, science, and daily structure are forming. And these ideas will slowly change how even children experience the night. Because medieval sleep is not frozen in time. It is evolving. And the next shift will come not from plague or war, but from light itself. And that change will quietly transform the night forever. That is where our story moves next. Light begins as a small flame, a simple candle made of tallow, an oil lamp filled with animal fat, a wick flickering softly in the corner of a dark room. At first, this light does not seem powerful. It is weak. It smokes. It smells. It must be watched carefully, because one careless spark can burn down an entire wooden street. But slowly, across the late Middle Ages, light begins to stretch the night. In earlier centuries, darkness truly meant rest. When the sun set, activity faded quickly. The first sleep came naturally, because there was little else to do. Now imagine a wealthy merchant's home in the 1400s in Venice. Trade has made the city rich. Spices, silk, glass, money flows through its canals. In this house, candles are not rare treasures. They are tools. After supper, instead of immediately preparing for bed, the family remains seated at the table. A candle burns steadily. The merchant reviews accounts. His wife embroiders cloth. A son practices reading from a handwritten book. The first sleep begins later than it once did. Not by hours at first, just a little. But that small change matters. The watch, that peaceful middle waking period, begins to shrink. Because if you go to bed later, you wake closer to dawn. The old rhythm of first sleep, waking hour, second sleep, starts to blur at the edges. In growing cities like London and Paris, taverns begin staying open later. Lanterns hang outside doors. People gather for drink and conversation after sunset. Night becomes slightly more social, still dangerous, still dark, no longer completely silent. And then come the clocks. Large mechanical clocks appear in church towers across Europe. Their bells strike each hour. Time is no longer just sunrise and sunset. It is counted, measured, divided into precise pieces. Midnight becomes a clearer idea. Instead of after first sleep, people begin saying at 11 or at 12. This seems small, but it changes the way humans think about the night. Sleep becomes something that fits into numbered hours. Merchants schedule meetings. Bakers plan their work precisely. Guards change shifts based on bells instead of stars. In monasteries, prayer times remain strict, but now they align more clearly with clock hours. The sacred rhythm of waking for matins begins to merge with mechanical time. The body still feels the pull of natural darkness, but society begins pulling in another direction. Imagine a student at the University of Oxford in the late 1400s. He sits in a small chamber lit by a single candle. Books lie open. He reads late into the night, studying philosophy or theology. He pushes past the natural urge to sleep. His first sleep may not begin until much later than sunset. When he finally lies down, exhaustion crashes heavily. But the watch may not come at all. He sleeps straight until morning. This is not yet common. Most people still follow the old pattern, but the seeds of change are planted. Light allows activity to stretch into darkness, and as activity grows, sleep compresses. Even in rural villages, small changes appear. Candles become slightly cheaper. Oil lamps improve. Wealthier farmers extend evening tasks. Women spin wool later into the night during winter. Families sit around the fire telling longer stories. Darkness feels less absolute, but it is still fragile. A sudden gust of wind can blow out a candle. A shortage of wax can shorten evenings again. Fire remains a constant threat. Cities like Florence suffer devastating fires because of careless flames left burning too long. So most people remain cautious. And yet, culturally, the idea of the night begins to shift. Earlier, night belonged to rest, prayer, and fear. Now it slowly begins to hold productivity. The wealthy use it for study. Merchants use it for planning. Nobles use it for entertainment. Late-night feasts in castles grow more elaborate. Picture a noble hall lit with dozens of candles. Musicians play softly. Guests drink wine past what would once have been bedtime. Laughter echoes against stone walls. Servants move quietly, replacing candles as they melt. Outside, the rest of the countryside sleeps in darkness. Two worlds exist side by side. One bound tightly to the sun, the other slowly breaking free. But this transition is uneven. For peasants working the land, exhaustion still wins. Their bodies demand early rest. Artificial light cannot erase muscle fatigue, so they still experience first sleep and second sleep more often than city elites. However, something else is happening. Urban life grows denser. More people crowd into smaller spaces. Noise increases at night. Carts roll later. Taverns shout longer. Street vendors sometimes operate after dark. The night becomes louder, and with noise comes disruption. Sleep in cities becomes more fragile, more fragmented. Watchmen call out the hour loudly through streets. Their voices echo past midnight, and all is well. But their shouting itself wakes many. The quiet, peaceful watch that once belonged to individuals begins to compete with urban sound. And slowly, almost invisibly, humans begin adapting. Instead of two separate sleeps, some start moving toward one longer stretch. Not because doctors recommend it, not because science understands it, but because society is reshaping the rhythm. Still, the transformation is not complete. In most villages, in most homes, in most monasteries, the ancient pattern survives. People lie down after sunset. They wake once. They sleep again. But the balance is fragile now, because another force is growing, not just light, not just clocks, but industry. Workshops are expanding. Trade routes are widening. Cities are swelling with people chasing opportunity. And with growth comes a demand for more structured time, more consistent hours, more productivity. The medieval night is beginning to shrink, and as it does, something deeply human is quietly changing. Because sleep is not just rest. It is rhythm. It is culture. It is identity. And when that rhythm shifts, society shifts with it. We are standing at the edge of a transformation. The old world of divided sleep still breathes in straw huts and stone monasteries, but the new world, measured, timed, illuminated, is rising slowly from candlelight. And soon, the medieval night as people once knew it will begin to fade. That turning point is closer than it seems. And that is where our journey continues. The change does not arrive with a loud announcement. There is no single night when all of Europe suddenly stops waking between first and second sleep. Instead, it happens slowly, quietly, like a candle burning lower without anyone noticing. By the late 1400s and into the early 1500s, Europe is shifting. Trade is expanding. Cities are growing larger and more crowded. Markets are busier. Workshops are louder. Life is speeding up. And when life speeds up, sleep must adjust. Imagine a craftsman living in Antwerp around the year 1500. His city is booming with trade. Ships arrive loaded with goods from distant lands. Money flows through the streets. He works long hours shaping wood, metal, or cloth. Orders must be completed on time. Customers expect reliability. The church bells still ring. The sun still sets. But now, his schedule is less flexible. If he wakes during the old watch period, he may not lie there peacefully reflecting or whispering prayers. He may feel anxious. He may calculate tomorrow's workload. He may worry about deadlines. Sleep begins to feel less like a natural rhythm and more like something that must fit around responsibility. The middle waking hour becomes inconvenient. And so, slowly, some people try to ignore it. They roll over. They force their eyes closed. They attempt to sleep straight through the night. This does not happen everywhere at once. In rural villages, the old pattern still survives longer. Farmers remain tied closely to daylight. Their bodies follow seasons naturally. But in larger cities like London and Paris, the pressure of structured work grows stronger. Apprentices rise before dawn. Merchants open shops at fixed hours. Bakers must have bread ready precisely when markets open. Clocks are now common in public spaces. The idea of sleeping from 1 hour to another without interruption begins to seem more practical. The watch fades quietly, and something else grows in its place. Artificial light improves further. Candles are still expensive for the poor, but wealthier households use them more freely. Oil lamps become brighter and more stable. In some streets, lanterns are hung publicly to reduce crime. Night no longer belongs entirely to darkness. It becomes a continuation of day. People talk later, work later, read later. And when bedtime shifts forward, the natural wakeful gap in the middle compresses or disappears. By the 1600s, written references to first sleep and second sleep become less common in documents. The language itself begins to fade. It is not that people suddenly stop waking at night. Humans still stir. They still turn. They still rise occasionally. But the idea that waking in the middle of the night is normal and expected begins to weaken. Instead, continuous sleep becomes the goal. If someone wakes in the middle of the night and cannot fall back asleep quickly, it starts to feel like a problem. A subtle but powerful shift. Now picture a growing port city like Amsterdam. Ships unload cargo even before sunrise. Sailors sleep in cramped quarters. Workers begin loading goods in darkness lit by lanterns. The city hums earlier than ever before. Sleep must adapt to economic demand. And then comes a deeper transformation, one that is still building in this period. Industry. Workshops grow into larger operations. Production increases. The demand for labor becomes more constant. Time becomes money in a clearer way than ever before. If you wake in the middle of the night and cannot return to sleep, you are not reflecting peacefully anymore. You are tired for work. Fatigue becomes an obstacle. In earlier centuries, waking during the watch did not harm productivity. It was part of the rhythm. But in a society demanding longer, structured hours, uninterrupted sleep becomes valuable. By the time Europe approaches the early modern era, the medieval pattern is fading in cities and among the educated classes. But it does not disappear overnight. in remote countryside, in isolated villages, older generations continue their divided sleep quietly. Grandparents still speak of first sleep and second sleep. Farmers still rise briefly at midnight to check animals or tend small tasks. The old rhythm survives in pockets, and yet the world is changing faster now. Light grows stronger. Cities grow louder. Work grows stricter. And something deeply human begins to shift inside the body itself. Modern sleep, one long stretch of 7 or 8 hours, is slowly being born. But this new pattern is not necessarily more natural. It is shaped by society, shaped by economy, shaped by technology. The medieval night, once long and deeply divided, is shrinking. Yet even as it fades, its memory lingers. There is something almost peaceful about the old rhythm. First sleep, the quiet watch beneath endless stars. Second sleep before dawn, a world where darkness was not fought, but accepted. A world where waking at midnight was not called insomnia. It was simply life. But that life is disappearing, because soon even stronger light will arrive. Streets will glow. Factories will run through darkness. Night will no longer mean rest. And when that happens, sleep itself will become something humans struggle to reclaim. The medieval way of sleeping will feel distant, almost forgotten, and the final transformation of the night is just ahead. That is where we turn next. By the late 1600s and into the 1700s, the night has begun to change almost imperceptibly for most people. The slow creep of light, clocks, and social expectation has transformed how medieval humans approached sleep. Yet, fragments of the old world linger like echoes in the shadows. In villages, some still follow the ancient rhythm. First sleep, quiet wakefulness. Second sleep. A farmer might rise briefly at midnight to check the animals, feed a fire, or whisper a prayer. Then sink back into the straw, soothed by the knowledge that the world is still alive, but at rest. The dark fields stretch endlessly, and in that silence, there is a rhythm that matches the heartbeat of the earth itself. But in growing cities, life pulses differently. Imagine the streets of Venice at night, canals reflecting lantern light. Merchants and shipworkers still labor late into the evening, accounting for goods and preparing for early departures. Bakers stir dough by lamplight, apprentices polish tools, and taverns hum with quiet conversation, echoing along narrow alleys. The night is no longer a refuge of peace. It is a continuation of the day's responsibilities. Sleep is increasingly treated as a commodity of productivity. The middle watch, the quiet, reflective hours once woven into the night shrinks. People are no longer expected or encouraged to rise at midnight. Those who wake may feel frustration or anxiety because rest is now measured, valued, and often interrupted by necessity rather than choice. Human bodies, however, still remember the old ways. Occasional midnight stirring persists, a faint memory of an era when the night was a separate, sacred space. Children grow up under this shifting rhythm. In urban households, apprentices and young servants learn to adjust to structured sleep. They rise for dawn work, yet they also stay awake longer in candlelit rooms, reading, practicing crafts, or assisting their masters. Dreams persist as whispers of the subconscious, but the freedom of quiet night reflection diminishes. Even in play, night begins to feel compressed, regulated. In monasteries and among the clergy, rituals continue to anchor sleep to tradition. Bells mark midnight matins, and some monks still rise from their straw pallets for prayer. Yet even here, modern influences creep in. Candlelight allows reading later into the evening. Precise hours begin to dictate when meals and work occur. Even the most disciplined lives cannot entirely resist the pull of societal change. Outside, in the countryside, night remains a time of survival. Farmers tend to fires, animals, and crops. Travelers sleeping on roads or in barns remain vulnerable to wind, rain, and thieves. Pilgrims huddle together, cloaks pressed for warmth, whispering prayers beneath the cold gaze of the moon. Darkness is still a force to be respected and endured. And yet, the contrast between rural and urban life grows starker. The night that once seemed universal now feels different depending on where you live. In cities, streets and homes glow faintly. Time is measured meticulously, and sleep is treated as a tool to optimize the day. In the country, the moon still rules. Shadows stretch across frozen fields, and first and second sleep linger in quiet houses. Across Europe, culture itself begins to reshape the meaning of rest. Philosophers and doctors begin to consider sleep in a new way. The human body is analyzed, studied, and categorized. Disrupted sleep, once accepted as natural, begins to be labeled a problem. Interrupted nights, which were once routine and even functional, are now sometimes called unhealthy. Continuous sleep becomes an ideal rather than a rhythm. This change is slow. It is gradual, but it is relentless. The medieval night, once divided and meditative, becomes compressed, regimented, and increasingly measured. The first and second sleep fade into history, leaving behind only traces in literature, diaries, and folk memory. And as this transition accelerates, the human relationship with darkness, with dreams, and with the quiet of the midnight watch begins to transform forever. And yet, the remnants of the old night linger like ghosts. Candlelit rooms, sleepy fields, and quiet city streets all carry hints of an older world where waking at midnight was natural, not anomalous, where humans were intimate with both darkness and silence, where the night itself was alive with reflection, fear, prayer, and wonder. But a new era approaches, one of artificial light, regimented work, and unbroken sleep. One where the night will no longer pause for the watch, where darkness will be challenged, shaped, and redefined by human invention. And this new era is about to change not just when people sleep, but how they dream, how they feel, and how they experience the world while the sun is gone. As the candle flickers lower, as clocks mark time more precisely, and as streets grow brighter, the ancient patterns of first and second sleep fade, leaving behind questions about what is lost when the night is conquered. And that brings us to the final chapter of our journey through medieval sleep. How the culmination of centuries of tradition, necessity, and human adaptation gave way to the nights we know today. The stage is set, and the transformation is about to unfold. By the 1700s, the transformation of the night is unmistakable. The world that once rose, fell, and paused with first and second sleep is giving way to something new, a night shaped by light, by measured hours, and by human demands, rather than the natural rhythms of darkness. In bustling cities like London, Paris, and Amsterdam, the streets are rarely truly silent. Lanterns hang from windows, taverns hum with conversation, and workshops continue under flickering candlelight well past the old sunset. Night has become an extension of the day, and sleep must adapt or be sacrificed. For the wealthy, this new night brings both opportunity and anxiety. Nobles may read by candlelight, study scientific treatises, or engage in late-night social gatherings in their grand halls. Music echoes in stone corridors. Conversations stretch long into the hours that were once reserved for prayer, reflection, or quiet dreaming. Sleep is still necessary, but the rhythm has changed. It is no longer two distinct phases separated by a watch. Now, a single stretch of rest is expected, interrupted only by external necessity rather than natural cycles. But in homes of the common people, adaptation is slower. Farmers, laborers, and villagers are still bound to the cycles of sunlight and seasonal work. They rise with the sun, labor through the day, and often fall into exhaustion-driven sleep in the evening. The middle watch may still exist in pockets, especially in remote villages. But even here, influences of light, commerce, and urban culture begin to seep in. Candles in wealthier homes illuminate neighboring streets. The rhythm of clocks, market schedules, and town announcements gradually synchronize even the countryside to a new temporal order. Children's nights change as well. Apprentices in workshops are expected to maintain strict hours, reading or practicing craft late into the evening, then rising before dawn to continue labor. Young nobles, educated by tutors, may study under candlelight, their rest structured and monitored to ensure productivity. The innocence and freedom once associated with children's nights, dream-filled, flexible, and quiet, becomes increasingly regulated. Night is a tool, a period to be managed, not simply experienced. Even sleep for travelers has evolved. Inns are slightly brighter, streets slightly safer due to lanterns and watchmen, but danger persists. Pilgrims and merchants still huddle together for warmth and protection. Yet the night now carries new expectations. Rest is measured by opportunity to resume work or continue journeys efficiently. The open sky remains awe-inspiring, but also functional sleep must be quick, strategic, and prepared against the unpredictable. The old associations of night with spiritual reflection begin to shift too. Prayer and meditation persist in monasteries and among the devout. Yet urban dwellers increasingly use the night for commerce, study, or leisure. The sacred rhythm that guided first sleep, the watch, and second sleep begins to erode. Night is no longer a pause in life. It is another arena for human ambition, curiosity, and survival. And yet, even as the medieval night fades, it leaves an imprint. Literature of the period still references first sleep and second sleep, acknowledging the subtle, natural pauses that once shaped human consciousness. Diaries, letters, and folk tales capture moments of midnight reflection, whispered prayers, and shared blankets, reminding us that the rhythm of human rest is deeply entwined with both culture and environment. As artificial light spreads, as clocks dominate, and as cities thrum with activity, sleep becomes increasingly continuous. The body adapts, but it is not entirely free from its ancient instincts. Occasional midnight stirring, vivid dreams, and the need to rise for unexpected reasons persist. Human beings, after centuries of divided sleep, carry fragments of that pattern in muscle memory and subconscious habit, even as society reshapes the night around them. The medieval night, with its gentle divisions and reflective pauses, does not vanish abruptly. It transforms gradually, its edges blurred by the pressures of commerce, urbanization, and technological innovation. The quiet watch, once central to nightly life, becomes optional, almost forgotten in the rhythm of modern schedules. Night is now measured, continuous, and often regimented. The first and second sleep survive only in historical records and the faint echoes of memory. Yet, there is something striking about the endurance of human imagination and adaptation. Even as the night is conquered by light and work, the need for rest, reflection, and safety persists. People find comfort in small rituals. A candle left burning, a warm blanket, whispered prayers before closing their eyes. Across centuries, the essence of sleep, its restorative and emotional power, remains central to life, even as the forms and patterns around it evolve. The medieval night, once so vast and mysterious, now merges slowly with the early modern era. Darkness is no longer absolute, yet it remains meaningful. It is shaped by human hands, yes, but but it also shapes human life, culture, and consciousness in return. From the straw huts of peasants to the candlelit halls of merchants and nobles, sleep continues to mark the rhythm of existence. And so, as the candle flickers in a late-night study, as a baker rises to knead dough before dawn, as a traveler huddles under a cloak in the cold air, the story of sleep unfolds, both old and new. The medieval patterns whisper beneath the modern routines, hidden in muscle memory, dreams, and the faint recollection of a time when waking at midnight was ordinary, natural, even necessary. Yet the story does not end here, for even after centuries of transformation, the night continues to evolve, reshaping not only the hours we spend resting, but the very way we understand rest itself, its meaning, and its place in human life, and beyond the city lights and candlelit rooms, beyond the structured schedules and the new ideals of continuous sleep, there lies another story, the one that explores not only the changing patterns of rest, but the human imagination, fear, and wonder that the night inspires. Even as sleep patterns shift under the weight of light, clocks, and social expectation, the night remains a canvas for the imagination, particularly in the medieval and early modern mind. Darkness, though increasingly punctuated by lanterns and candles, still holds power. It is not merely an absence of day. It is a presence in itself, shaping fears, dreams, and reflections in ways daylight cannot touch. Consider a scholar in Prague around the year 1600. He studies in a cramped chamber filled with books, scrolls, and the faint odor of candle tallow. He has spent the evening copying texts, annotating philosophical treatises, and perhaps translating works from Latin or Greek. Outside his window, the city streets are dimly lit, with occasional footsteps echoing through the cobblestones. The scholar finally sets down his quill, feeling the pull of exhaustion, yet he is not yet ready to sleep. For many in this period, the night carries dual meaning. On one hand, it is time for rest, reflection, and renewal. On the other, it is a liminal space where the supernatural, the unknown, and the human subconscious converge. People fear that spirits, demons, or mischievous beings are more active under cover of darkness. Stories of haunted castles, wandering souls, and mysterious apparitions abound. Even the most rational minds, educated in universities or sheltered within monasteries, are not immune to the emotional pull of night. Children experience this vividly. A child in a modest town in Nuremberg might lie awake beneath a thin blanket, listening to the wind rattle shutters or the distant barking of a dog. In their mind, shadows take shape. A tree outside the window becomes a lurking figure. Stories told by elders about wolves in forests, spirits wandering graveyards, or witches flying through the night echo in their imagination. The middle watch, once a natural pause for adults, becomes becomes a period of heightened awareness for children, fear and curiosity entwined. For adults, especially women alone or those living in cities, night can feel equally potent. A woman tending a small shop or working as a seamstress may sleep lightly, aware of the sounds of footsteps outside, the creak of doors, or the clatter of carts in distant streets. The night is not only a time for rest, but also a time of vigilance. Safety and security dictate how deeply one can sleep. And in crowded homes, shared beds, or open rooms, sleep is often shallow and broken. Yet in quieter moments, night also inspires contemplation and creativity. Monks in monasteries, having risen for matins, sometimes return to their straw pallets for a brief second sleep, using the quiet hours to reflect on scripture or write illuminated manuscripts. Scholars, poets, and philosophers, though often exhausted, find that the quiet of midnight, when most of the world sleeps, allows thought to flourish. The darkness sharpens the mind in ways daylight cannot replicate. Travelers, too, experience this heightened reality of night. Pilgrims on roads to Santiago de Compostela Cathedral or Canterbury Cathedral huddle beneath cloaks, their small fires sputtering against wind. The darkness is vast, enveloping, and sometimes terrifying. Every snapping twig in the nearby forest feels magnified. Every distant cry of an animal or human startles the senses. Sleep must be strategic, brief, cautious, and ready for sudden wakefulness. The watch period, once a natural pause, is filled with both fear and reflection in these moments. Even within castles and noble houses, the night retains a peculiar magic. Stone corridors amplify distant sounds, from footsteps to whispered conversations. Tapestries and heavy curtains shield drafts, yet rooms remain cool, and the flickering candlelight creates shadows that dance across walls. Children, servants, and even nobles lie in beds, often shared, surrounded by attendants and guards. Their sleep is both protected and observed. Dreams intermingle with the distant echo of bells, the faint clatter of armor, and the stories whispered by parents or nurses before lights dim. The medieval and early modern night is therefore a complex, multi-layered experience. It is shaped by necessity, safety, warmth, survival, but also by culture, fear, and imagination. It is both practical and mystical, while first sleep and second sleep provide structure in the quieter hours. The encroachment of artificial light, urban noise, and economic pressures begin to compress these pauses. Yet the essence of night, as a space for reflection, fear, and wonder persists. Sleep, in this period, is never just physical. It is social, emotional, and deeply entwined with environment. Shared beds, straw mattresses, cold stone floors, and the quiet company of family or strangers all influence how people rest. Nighttime becomes a mirror of human life itself. unpredictable, sometimes harsh, yet filled with the subtle rhythms of habit, imagination, and adaptation. And as these centuries progress, humans continue to negotiate the tension between the natural darkness of night and the expanding power of light and structure. The stage is being set for the modern sleep experience, where continuous rest becomes standard. But the shadows of medieval nights, both literal and psychological, linger in the way we dream, wake, and experience the quiet hours. Yet even as light conquers darkness, there are whispers of the old ways. In some villages, in the countryside, in monasteries untouched by commerce, the patterns of first sleep and second sleep survive. And these pockets remind us that sleep, though shaped by society and technology, always carries the weight of human history, memory, and imagination. The story of medieval sleep is not simply about exhaustion or survival. It is about the intimate connection between humans and the night, the way our ancestors adapted, feared, dreamed, and reflected. While the world outside was quiet, dark, and alive with possibility, and just as the night stretches onward, so too does the story of how sleep evolves, preparing us for the dramatic changes yet to come. By the dawn of the 18th century, the medieval night is fading further, yet it lingers in fragments, like shadows of a world slowly receding. The rhythm of first sleep and second sleep, once so natural, so universal, is now largely confined to memory, literature, and the quieter corners of rural life. Cities pulse with activity long after sunset, and artificial light stretches evenings, compressing the old nocturnal pause. But the human body, shaped by centuries of divided sleep, still carries traces of its ancient habits, stirring in the middle hours, even when society demands uninterrupted rest. In the countryside, life moves with a stubborn adherence to nature. Farmers in villages across England, France, and Italy still rise with the sun, tend livestock, and labor in fields, following rhythms that predate clocks. Fires burn low at night, and rooms remain dark except for occasional lanterns. Here, the night still feels expansive. The middle watch continues quietly in some households, an hour of wakefulness, reflection, or simple necessity. Perhaps a parent checks the animals, a child wakes briefly, or someone whispers a prayer, invoking protection or gratitude. The world is alive, but calm, punctuated by the soft sounds of life. A dog shifting, the wind through the trees, the distant toll of a bell. In towns and cities, however, night has been transformed. Candlelight glows in workshops, homes, and streets. Merchants tally accounts, apprentices practice skills, and taverns remain lively, even in the dead of night. Work and social life extend, reducing the once sacred hours of darkness. Sleep becomes increasingly continuous, valued as a single stretch that prepares the body for the demands of labor and and society. For many, the old rhythm is impractical, replaced by schedules dictated by commerce, urban life, and rising expectations of punctuality. Yet despite these societal changes, the psychological and emotional power of the night remains strong. Darkness is no longer absolute, but it still fosters reflection, fear, and creativity. Scholars, poets, and students often find that late night hours, illuminated by candle or lamp, are a space for contemplation and study. They sit alone, quills in hand, manuscripts open, pondering ideas that will shape philosophy, science, and literature for generations. The night, though shorter and brighter, remains a companion for thought, imagination, and subtle introspection. Children, too, experience the night differently depending on their environment. In rural homes, they may continue to rise briefly in the middle of sleep, huddled under shared blankets, whispering to siblings, or listening to distant sounds. In urban households, the night is more regimented, structured, and monitored. Apprentices, young nobles, and servants adjust to longer stretches of uninterrupted sleep. Though the instinctual stirrings in the middle of the night occasionally persist, dreams continue to be vivid, colored by stories, fears, and the sensory experiences of daily life. The night remains a space where imagination and reality intertwine. Travelers navigating roads and rivers experience a night that is both familiar and transformed. Inns are brighter, streets more navigable, and safety marginally improved, yet dangers remain. Wolves, thieves, storms, and illness continue to challenge those on the move. Sleep must be tactical, brief when necessary, deeper when conditions allow, and always prepared for sudden disturbance. The middle watch may be less about ritual or reflection, and more about survival. Still, it is a moment when the night asserts its quiet authority, reminding travelers that darkness is not entirely conquered. Even in castles, noble halls, and wealthy homes, the night reflects a duality. Tapestries, heavy curtains, and beds with multiple blankets provide warmth and comfort, while candles and lamps extend waking hours. Nobles may host music, discussion, or study late into the evening. Servants remain alert, attending fires, replenishing candles, or monitoring households. Sleep is structured yet enriched by the cultural and social dimensions of life. The night is no longer solely for rest. It is for activity, reflection, and the subtle rhythms of human society, compressed but never entirely lost. Across all classes, however, the tension between biology and society becomes increasingly apparent. Human bodies are still attuned to natural rhythms of darkness and temperature. Yet social pressures demand alignment with structured, continuous sleep. Nighttime habits are shaped by expectation as much as necessity. The instinct to wake briefly, to move, to reflect, or even to pray quietly is present in many, but it competes with cultural ideals of uninterrupted rest. Sleep is no longer only a personal experience, it is a social contract tied to productivity, morality, and modernity. And yet, despite the gradual disappearance of the medieval night, its influence lingers. Literature, folklore, diaries, and early scientific observations preserve memory of first sleep, the quiet watch, and second sleep. These fragments remind us that humans once experienced night not simply as a period of unconsciousness, but as a living, breathing space, part reflective, part fearful, part restorative. Darkness shaped emotion, thought, imagination, and social interaction. The rhythm of night was interwoven with life itself. As the 18th century advances, the world moves closer to the nights we recognize today. Illuminated, structured, and optimized for productivity and comfort. But the story of medieval sleep, its pauses, its fears, its wonder, remains embedded in the human consciousness. The ancient patterns do not vanish entirely. They echo faintly in habits, dreams, and memories, reminding us that the night was once a realm of mystery, reflection, and delicate rhythm. And in those echoes, we see the human struggle to balance rest, work, imagination, and survival. A struggle that continues to evolve even as the modern night solidifies, and one that will shape not only the hours we sleep, but the very way we experience darkness, dreams, and the quiet moments between the world and ourselves. As the 18th century unfolds, the medieval night, once expansive, reflective, and divided, has almost entirely yielded to the demands of the modernizing world. Cities are brighter, streets are busier, and the rhythms of human life increasingly dictate the pattern of sleep rather than the natural progression of darkness and light. Yet even in this new order, the ghosts of first sleep and second sleep linger, subtle reminders of a time when night was both intimate and communal, fearful yet contemplative. Imagine a street in Paris on a chilly winter evening. Lamps line the roads, casting warm circles of light on cobblestones damp from recent rain. Merchants finish business, apprentices close shops, and citizens prepare for the night's rest. Yet inside some homes, candlelight continues to flicker as the family engages in quiet activities, sewing, reading, or storytelling. The day does not end sharply. It bleeds gradually into night. Sleep becomes a destination, not a natural rhythm. The old pause between first and second sleep has become optional, compressed, or forgotten entirely. In wealthier homes, the extension of night fosters both productivity and leisure. Nobles linger over late suppers, exchanging conversation and observation. Music resonates in the halls, sometimes accompanied by dancing. Scholars and artists work under candlelight, pursuing creativity in the quieter hours when their peers have already succumbed to slumber. Here, night is both a canvas and a tool. It provides space for work, reflection, and indulgence. Sleep becomes a precious commodity, often postponed in the pursuit of ambition or social engagement. Contrast this with rural life, where the night retains elements of its old form. A farmer in Italy might still rise briefly to check livestock, stoke the hearth, or fetch water. The middle watch persists in these remote areas, a vestige of centuries-old patterns. The air is colder, the rooms darker, and the night stretches longer. Here, sleep remains segmented, and the quiet pause between first and second sleep carries practical and spiritual weight. People are attuned to their environment. The subtle sounds of animals, wind, and distant travelers, and their bodies dictate rhythm as much as the clock does. Travelers, too, continue to negotiate this changing landscape. Pilgrims or merchants journeying along roads or rivers must adapt to nights that vary widely in light, activity, and danger. Inns provide warmth, light, and some measure of comfort, but the darkness outside reminds them of the fragility of sleep. Even with lanterns and candles, the night retains unpredictability. Travelers often wake multiple times, not for reflection, but for protection or preparation, carrying with them echoes of the medieval watch, even as society increasingly prizes uninterrupted rest. Children in both rural and urban settings experience the night differently. Urban children, subject to stricter household schedules and candlelit study, gradually internalize the ideal of continuous sleep. Rural children, meanwhile, remain closer to older patterns, waking briefly, whispering with siblings, or listening to the distant sounds of night. Dreams, vivid and haunting, often reflect these nocturnal awakenings, blending fear, imagination, and reflection. Sleep is not merely biological. It is social, cultural, and emotional, a mirror of life itself. Monastic life preserves some of the old night, though even here, change is evident. Bells ring to mark canonical hours, yet candlelight allows extended study and reflection. Monks rise for matins and return to rest, sometimes dividing sleep in patterns reminiscent of first and second sleep, yet increasingly structured by human expectation and clock time. Religious and cultural practices adapt to the rhythms of society, blending tradition with the new demands of light, commerce, and urban life. By now, the tension between biology and society is unmistakable. The human body, honed over centuries to rise in the middle of the night, still stirs instinctively, even in urban, candlelit homes. People sometimes wake briefly, staring into shadows or listening for faint sounds. Anxiety, reflection, and anticipation accompany these awakenings, but the social ideal favors continuous sleep. The divided night becomes framed as old-fashioned, inefficient, or even unhealthy. The cultural memory of first sleep and second sleep is preserved in writing. But lived experience increasingly conforms to modern patterns. And yet, in this evolution, the essence of medieval night survives in unexpected ways. Stories, literature, and folklore carry echoes of midnight reflection, tales of spirits, wandering souls, and supernatural encounters remain vibrant in popular imagination, often retold during the long winter nights. In homes where candlelight flickers, humans still experience the quiet thrill of the dark hours, a subtle blend of fear, creativity, and intimacy that harkens back to the rhythm of the divided night. The medieval night, though largely transformed, continues to shape human consciousness. Sleep is now measured and structured, yet the memory of night's pause, the reflective, fearful, and deeply personal hours, persists in subtle ways, in dreams, in instinctual stirrings, in whispered prayers, and in the stories passed from one generation to the next. Night remains powerful, not merely for rest, but for the quiet ways it molds thought, emotion, and human culture. And as centuries progress, the story of sleep and darkness continues to unfold, leading to the final transformations that will define the modern understanding of rest, time, and the human relationship with night itself. As the 18th century turns toward the 19th, the night is almost unrecognizable to those who lived in the medieval era. Cities have grown larger, brighter, and more regimented. Street lamps cast constant illumination along avenues and squares. Workshops remain active into late hours, and the rhythm of human life increasingly imposes itself upon darkness. The once sacred pauses of first sleep and second sleep have largely vanished, replaced by expectations of uninterrupted rest. Yet, despite these sweeping changes, the night retains its profound influence on human experience, carrying echoes of centuries past. In urban centers like Vienna or London, households are alive long after sunset. Candles glow in tall windows, reflecting off polished floors and walls. Families finish late meals. Apprentices complete work for their masters, and scholars pore over texts by lamplight. Sleep, once a flexible rhythm dictated by instinct and darkness, is now compressed into a single stretch, carefully calculated to prepare for the demands of a new, industrializing society. The pause in the middle of the night, once filled with reflection, prayer, or quiet activity, is now seen as a disruption to be minimized or ignored. Yet in quieter corners, the old patterns survive, stubborn and persistent. In remote villages or small hamlets, people rise briefly at midnight, not from obligation, but from instinct. A mother checks on a child. A farmer ensures livestock are safe. A traveler stirs, listening to the wind and distant sounds of the countryside. These moments are brief, intimate, and profoundly human. Remnants of a time when night was a living space rather than merely a backdrop for sleep. The middle watch, though fading, continues to weave its subtle threads into the fabric of life. Even in large homes, the night retains an emotional and psychological power that transcends practicality. Candlelit rooms and shadowed hallways invite reflection, creativity, and sometimes fear. Children whisper stories to one another, weaving imagination into the darkness. Adults linger over letters, records, or books, finding that the quiet hours between wakefulness and sleep sharpen thought and feeling. Night becomes both an extension of life and a separate realm, a space where contemplation, anxiety, and dreams coexist. Travelers on the roads or rivers experience the night as both challenge and refuge. Inns provide warmth, light, and temporary security, yet the darkness outside carries a latent sense of danger. Wolves, thieves, and sudden storms still remind humans that night, despite illumination and society's structure, retains its wild, uncontrollable essence. Sleep, even when continuous, is never fully free from instinct or vigilance. The middle hours, though shortened or forgotten by culture, occasionally reassert themselves through subtle awakenings and quiet awareness. Monastic and religious life, too, balances old and new. Bells mark canonical hours, yet candlelight extends study, reflection, and labor into periods that were once reserved for rest. Monks may still rise briefly for matins or prayer, echoing the rhythm of first and second sleep. But their lives are increasingly measured by clocks, schedules, and structured routine. Even the sacred night bends to social and technological pressure, though its influence remains palpable in the quiet moments of reflection and devotion. By now, the tension between the natural human rhythm and the imposed modern schedule is unmistakable. Bodies are still attuned to instinctual patterns, the stirrings of midnight, the brief awakenings, the subtle restlessness that hints at the ancient pause between first and second sleep. Yet society increasingly values uninterrupted rest, framing continuous sleep as ideal for health, productivity, and moral order. The rhythms of centuries are compressed, codified, and refined into what we now recognize as the normal night. And yet, even as these changes solidify, the medieval night survives in memory, imagination, and subtle human behavior. Literature, diaries, folklore, and personal reflection preserve its presence. People still whisper of midnight awakenings, share stories of spirits or strange sounds, and engage in small rituals of observation, prayer, or contemplation. These remnants remind us that sleep is more than biological. It is cultural, emotional, and deeply connected to human perception of time, safety, and the unknown. Across centuries, the evolution of night illustrates a profound truth. Human life is inseparable from darkness, and yet humans continually reshape it. Medieval patterns of first and second sleep were not merely practical. They were ways of inhabiting the night, of connecting to natural rhythms, and of exploring the inner landscape of thought, fear, and reflection. The shift to continuous sleep, while adaptive to social, economic, and technological pressures, represents both gain and loss. Efficiency at the cost of ritual, speed at the cost of pause, structure at the cost of intimacy with darkness itself. And even as industrial society rises, with its factories, lamps, and regimented hours, the echoes of the medieval night persist in subtle awakenings, in dreams, in quiet contemplation. Humans carry traces of a world where darkness was not merely the absence of light, but a living, breathing companion, silent, reflective, mysterious, and deeply intertwined with life itself. Yet the story of night and sleep is far from over. Even as society appears to master darkness, new pressures, inventions, and cultural shifts lie ahead, promising to reshape sleep once again and challenging humanity to find balance between rest, labor, and the quiet, mysterious hours of the night. As we step fully into the 19th century, the medieval night has become nearly unrecognizable. The world is illuminated by lamps, streetlights, and eventually gaslight, spreading artificial glow into corners that once knew only darkness. Streets hum with late-night activity. Workshops and factories extend the day, and the rhythm of human life is dictated less by the rise and fall of the sun, and more by clocks, schedules, and societal expectation. Yet, despite these transformations, the medieval night, the quiet, segmented, reflective night of first sleep and second sleep, still whispers beneath the surface, faint but persistent, in the cities of London, Berlin, and Vienna. Households and streets glow with light well into what was once considered the dead of night. Families finish supper by lamplight. Apprentices complete their work. And the bustling rhythm of human activity leaves little room for the natural pauses of earlier centuries. Sleep has become compressed, valued as a single stretch rather than a segmented experience, measured and regimented according to the demands of labor and social expectation. Yet in rural villages and remote corners, echoes of the old night persist. A farmer checks livestock under the silver gleam of moonlight. A mother quietly tends a child, and a traveler rests briefly along a road, listening to the whisper of wind through the trees. These moments, brief and intimate, are remnants of a world where night was a living entity, where humans interacted with darkness, not merely survived it. The middle watch, though fading, lingers in these pockets of life, carrying the memory of centuries-old rhythm and reflection. Even in the grand homes of the wealthy, the night is a space of both productivity and contemplation. Candlelight illuminates reading rooms, music echoes in quiet corridors, and conversations stretch late into the evening. Sleep is necessary, postponed, often yielding to study, artistic creation, or social engagement. The night, though structured and illuminated, continues to shape thought, creativity, and imagination in ways that daylight cannot replicate. It is a companion to the mind as much as a refuge for the body. Children experience the night in dual ways. Urban children learn the discipline of continuous sleep, while rural children continue to wake briefly, sharing whispers under blankets or listening to the soft sounds of night. Dreams carry the weight of these awakenings, blending imagination with memory, fear with curiosity. Sleep is never purely biological. It is social, emotional, and intertwined with human experience. Even the artificial structures of modern night cannot erase the instincts honed over centuries of living in darkness. Travelers, too, navigate the evolving night with both caution and wonder. Roads are illuminated, inns provide warmth, and cities offer relative safety. Yet the unpredictability of darkness remains. Storms, wild animals, and the occasional threat of human danger remind travelers that night, despite illumination, retains its element of risk. The pause once dictated by natural rhythm is now consciously observed, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of habit, and occasionally as a quiet ritual of reflection inherited from a time when waking at midnight was normal. Even religious practice preserves fragments of the medieval night. Monks rise for matins, observe canonical hours, and study or reflect by candlelight. Rituals, prayer, and contemplation mark periods of wakefulness, echoing the segmented nights of the past. Yet these practices are increasingly structured, measured by clocks and schedules, reflecting the broader social shift toward continuous, uninterrupted sleep. Night is no longer a purely natural rhythm. It is both lived and imposed, a balance of biology, culture, and technology. Throughout society, the tension between instinct and expectation remains. The human body, shaped by centuries of divided sleep, still stirs in the middle of the night. Brief awakenings, reflections, and subtle movements persist, even when continuous rest is culturally idealized. The echoes of first sleep and second sleep linger in dreams, stories, and subconscious memory, reminding us that night is not merely absence of light, but a complex, living experience, one that shapes thought, emotion, and the very way humans interact with the world. By now, sleep is both biological and cultural, shaped by centuries of adaptation. Medieval patterns are largely gone, yet their influence endures, hidden in the quiet awareness of night, in the instinctual pause between wakefulness and rest, and in the stories that have survived through generations. Darkness, once a companion, a mirror, and a canvas, continues to influence humanity even as artificial light and regimented schedules dominate. And so, the story of medieval sleep draws to its final rhythm not as an abrupt end, but as a transformation that stretches forward. First sleep, second sleep. The midnight watch all have merged into the continuous night we know today, leaving behind traces of human adaptation, fear, creativity, and reflection. Night has been tamed and structured, yet its essence, the intimate, reflective, and mysterious hours, remains deeply embedded in human consciousness. From the straw-filled huts of peasants to candlelit studies of scholars, from moonlit roads to bustling city streets, the medieval night has shaped the human experience of rest, dreams, and reflection in ways that resonate even now. And though society has conquered darkness with light and routine, the imagination, the memory, and the subtle instincts of centuries of divided sleep remain quietly alive, reminding us that the night has always been more than mere absence of day. It is a space of life, thought, and human connection. The story of medieval sleep ends not with finality, but with a quiet echo, a whisper through the centuries, teaching us that even in our modern, illuminated nights, the pulse of first sleep and second sleep still beats softly in the human experience.